Chapter 11 of the White Company. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Clive Catterall. The White Company by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Chapter 11. How a young shepherd had a perilous flock. Black was the mouth of Twynham Castle, though a pair of torches burning at the further end of the gateway cast a red glare over the outer bailey, and sent a dim ruddy flicker through the rough hewn arch, rising and falling with fitful brightness. Over the door the travellers could discern the escutcheon of the Montacutes, a roebuck gules on a field argent, flanked on either side by smaller shields, which bore the red roses of the veteran constable. As they passed over the drawbridge, Alleyne marked the gleam of arms in the embrasures to right and left, and they had scarce set foot upon the causeway ere a hoarse blare burst from a bugle, and with screech of hinge and clank of chain the ponderous bridge swung up into the air, drawn by unseen hands. At the same instant the huge portcullis came rattling down from above and shut off the last fading light of day. Sir Nigel and his lady walked on in deep talk, while a fat under steward took charge of the three comrades and led them to the buttery, where beef, bread, and beer were kept ever in readiness for the wayfarer. After a hearty meal and a dip in the trough to wash the dust from them, they strolled forth into the bailey, where the bowmen peered about through the darkness at wall and at keep, with the carping eyes of one who has seen something of sieges and is not likely to be satisfied. To Alleyne and to John, however, it appeared to be as great and as stout a fortress as ever could be built by the hands of men. Erected by Sir Baldwin de Redvers in the old fighting days of the 12th century, when men thought much of war and little of comfort, Castle Twynham had been designed as a stronghold pure and simple, unlike those later and more magnificent structures where warlike strength had been combined with the magnificence of a palace. From the time of the Edwards, such buildings as Conway or Carnarvon castles, to say nothing of Royal Windsor, had shown that it was possible to secure luxury and peace as well as security in times of trouble. Sir Nigel's trust, however, still frowned above the smooth flowing waters of the Avon, very much as the stern race of early Anglo Normans had designed it. There were the broad outer and inner baileys, not paved but sown with grass to nourish the sheep and cattle which might be driven in on sign of danger. All round were high and turreted walls, with at the corner a bare square faced keep, gaunt and windowless, rearing up from a lofty mound, which made it almost inaccessible to the assailant. Against the bailey walls were rows of frail wooden houses and leaning sheds, which gave shelter to the archers and men at arms who formed the garrison. The doors of these humble dwellings were mostly open, and against the yellow glare from within Alleyne could see the bearded fellows cleaning their harness, while their wives would come out for a gossip with their needlework in their hands and their long black shadows streaming across the yard. The air was full of the clack of their voices and the merry prattling of children, in strange contrast to the flash of arms and constant warlike challenge from the walls above. "Methinks a company of school lads could hold this place against an army," quoth John. "And so say I," said Alleyne. "Nay, they are wide of the clout," the bowman said gravely. "By my hilt, I have seen a stronger fortalice carried in a summer evening. I remember such a one in Picardy, with a name as long as a Gascon's pedigree. It was when I served under Sir Robert Knolles, before the days of the Company, and we came by good plunder by the sacking of it. I had myself a great silver bowl with two goblets and a plastron of Spanish steel. Pasque Dieu, there are some fine women over yonder. Mort de ma vie, see to the one in the doorway. I will go speak to her. But whom have we here?" "Is there an archer here, hight Sam Aylward?" asked a gaunt man at arms, clanking up to them across the courtyard. "My name, friend," quoth the bowman. "Then sure I have no need to tell thee mine," said the other. "By the rood, if it is not Black Simon of Norwich!" cried Aylward. "A mon coeur, camarade, a mon coeur! Ah, but I am blithe to see thee. The two fell upon each other and hugged like bears.
"And where from, old blood and bones?" asked the bowman.
"I am in service here. Tell me, comrade, is it sooth that we shall have another fling at these Frenchmen? It is so rumored in the guard room, and that Sir Nigel will take the field once more."
"It is like enough, mon gar, as things go."
"Now may the Lord be praised!" cried the other. "This very night I will set apart a golden ouche to be offered on the shrine of my name saint. I have pined for this, Aylward, as a young maid pines for her lover."
"Art so set on plunder, then? Is the purse so light that there is not enough for a rouse? I have a bag at my belt, camarade, and you have but to put your fist into it for what you want. It was ever share and share between us."
"Nay, friend, it is not Frenchmen's gold, but Frenchmen's blood that I would have. I should not rest quiet in the grave, coz, if I had not had another turn at them. For with us in France it has ever been fair and honest war, a shut fist for the man, but a bended knee for the woman. But how was it at Winchelsea when their galleys came down upon it some few years back? I had an old mother there, lad, who had come down thither from the Midlands to be nearer her son. They found her afterwards by her own hearthstone, thrust through by a Frenchman's bill. My second sister, my brother's wife, and her two children, they were but ash heaps in the smoking ruins of their house. I will not say we have not wrought great scathe upon France, but women and children have ever been safe from us. And so, old friend, my heart is hot within me, and I long to hear the old battle cry again. And by God's truth, if Sir Nigel unfurls his pennon, here is one who will be right glad to feel the saddle flaps under his knees."
"We have seen good work together, old war dog," quoth Aylward, "and by my hilt we may hope to see more ere we die. But we are more like to hawk at the Spanish woodcock than at the French heron, though certes it is rumored that Du Guesclin, with all the best lances of France, have taken service under the lions and towers of Castile. But, comrade, it is in my mind that there is some small matter of dispute still open between us."
"'Fore God, it is sooth!" cried the other. "I had forgot it. The provost marshal and his men tore us apart when we last met."
"On which, friend, we vowed that we should settle the point when we next came together. Hast thy sword, I see, and the moon throws glimmer enough for such old night birds as we. En garde, mon gar, I have not heard clink of steel this month or more."
"Out from the shadow, then," said the other, drawing his sword. "A vow is a vow, and not lightly to be broken." "A vow to the saints," cried Alleyne, "is indeed not to be set aside, but this is a devil's vow, and, simple clerk as I am yet the mouthpiece of the true church when I say that it were mortal sin to fight on such a quarrel. What! Shall two grown men carry malice for years, and fly like snarling curs at each other's throats?"
"No malice, my young clerk, no malice," quoth Black Simon.
"I have not a bitter drop in my heart for mine old comrade. But the quarrel, as he hath told you, is still open and unsettled."
"Fall on, Aylward."
"Not whilst I can stand between you," cried Alleyne, springing before the bowman. "It is shame and sin to see two Christian Englishmen turn swords against each other like the frenzied bloodthirsty paynim."
"And what's more," said Hordle John,
suddenly appearing out of the buttery with the huge board upon which the pastry was rolled,
"if either raise sword I shall flatten him like a Shrovetide pancake. By the black rood, I shall drive him into the earth like a nail into a door rather than see you do scathe to each other."
"'Fore God, this is a strange way of preaching peace," cried Black Simon. "You may find the scathe yourself, my lusty friend, if you raise your great cudgel to me. I had as lief had the castle drawbridge drop upon my pate." "Tell me, Aylward," said Alleyne earnestly, with his hands outstretched to keep the pair asunder, "what is the cause of quarrel, that we may see whether honorable settlement may not be arrived at." The bowman looked down at his feet and then up at the moons.
"Parbleu!" he cried. "The cause of the quarrel? Why, mon petit, it was years ago in Limousin, and how can I bear in mind what was the cause of it? Simon there hath it at the end of his tongue."
"Not I, in troth," replied the other. "I have had other things to think of. There was some sort of bickering over dice or wine."
"Or was it a woman, coz?" "Pasque Dieu, but you have nicked it," cried Aylward. It was indeed about a woman, and the quarrel must go forward, for I am still of the same mind as before." "What of the woman, then?" asked Simon. "May the murrain strike me if I can call to mind aught about her." "It was La Blanche Rose, made at the sign of the Trois Corbeaux at Limoges. Bless her pretty heart! Why, mon gar., I loved her." "So did many," quoth Simon. "I call her to mind now. On the very day that we fought over the little hussy she went off with Evan ap Price, a long legged Welsh dagsman. They have a hostel of their own now, somewhere on the banks of the Garonne, where the landlord drinks so much of the liquor that there is little left for the customers." "So ends our quarrel, then," said Aylward, sheathing his sword. "A Welsh dagsman, i' faith. C'est un mauvais goût, ma camarade, and the more so when she had a jolly archer and a lusty man at arms to choose from."
"True, old lad, and it is as well that we can compose our differences honorably, for Sir Nigel had been out at the first clash of steel, and he hath sworn that if there be quarrelling in the garrison he would smite the right hand from the broilers. You know him of old, and that he is as like to be as good as his word."
"Mordieu, yes. But there are ale, mead, and wine in the buttery, and the steward a merry rogue who will not haggle over a quart or two. Buvons, mon gar., for it is not every day that two old friends come together."
The old soldiers and Hordle John strode off together in all good fellowship. Alleyne had turned to follow them when he felt a touch upon his shoulder, and found a young page by his side. "The Lord Loring commands," said the boy, "that you will follow me to the great chamber and await him there." "But my comrades? His commands were for you alone." Alleyne followed the messenger to the east end of the courtyard, where a broad flight of steps led up to the doorway of the main hall, the outer wall of which is washed by the waters of the Avon. As designed at first, no dwelling had been allotted to the lord of the castle and his family, but the dark and dismal basement story of the keep. A more civilized or more effeminate generation, however, had refused to be pent up in such a cellar, and the hall with its neighboring chambers had been added for their accommodation. Up the broad steps Alleyne went, still following his boyish guide, until at the folding oak doors the latter paused and ushered him into the main hall of the castle. On entering the room the clerk looked round, but seeing no one he continued to stand, his cap in his hand, examining with the greatest interest a chamber which was so different to any to which he was accustomed. The days had gone by when a nobleman's hall was but a barn like rush strewn enclosure, the common lounge and eating room of every inmate of the castle. The Crusaders had brought back with them experiences of domestic luxuries, of Damascus carpets and rugs of Aleppo, which made them impatient of the hideous bareness and want of privacy which they found in their ancestral strongholds. Still stronger, however, had been the influence of the great French war, for however well matched the nations might be in martial exercises, there could be no question but that our neighbors were infinitely superior to us in the arts of peace. A stream of returning knights, of wounded soldiers, and of unransomed French noblemen had been for a quarter of a century continually pouring into England, every one of whom exerted an influence in the direction of greater domestic refinement, while shiploads of French furniture from Calais, Rouen, and other plundered towns had supplied our own artisans with models on which to shape their work. Hence, in most English castles, and in Castle Twynham among the rest, chambers were to be found which would seem to be not wanting either in beauty or in comfort. In the great stone fireplace a log fire was spurting and crackling, throwing out a ruddy glare which, with the 4 bracket lamps which stood at each corner of the room, gave a bright and lightsome air to the whole apartment. Above was a wreathwork of blazonry extending up to the carved and corniced oaken roof, while on either side stood the high canopied chairs placed for the master of the house and for his most honored guest. The walls were hung all round with most elaborate and brightly colored tapestry, representing the achievements of Sir Bevis of Hampton, and behind this convenient screen were stored the tables dormant and benches which would be needed for banquet or high festivity.
The floor was of polished tiles, with a square of red and black diapered Flemish carpet in the centre, and many settees, cushions, folding chairs, and carved bunkholes littered all over it. At the further end was a long black buffet or dresser, thickly covered with gold cups, silver salvers, and other such valuables. All this Alleyne examined with curious eyes, but most interesting of all to him was a small ebony table at his very side, on which, by the side of a chess board and the scattered chessmen, there lay an open manuscript, written in a right clerkly hand, and set forth with brave flourishes and devices among the margins. In vain Alleyne bethought him of where he was, and of those laws of good breeding and decorum which should restrain him. Those colored capitals and black even lines drew his hand down to them as the lodestone draws the needle, until, almost before he knew it, he was standing with the romance of Garin de Monglane before his eyes, so absorbed in its contents as to be completely oblivious both of where he was and why he had come there. He was brought back to himself, however, by a sudden little ripple of quick feminine laughter. Aghast, he dropped the manuscript among the chessmen, and stared in bewilderment round the room. It was as empty and as still as ever. Again he stretched his hand out to the romance, and again came that roguish burst of merriment. He looked up at the ceiling, back at the closed door, and round at the stiff folds of motionless tapestry. Of a sudden, however, he caught a quick shimmer from the corner of a high backed buncal in front of him, and, shifting a pace or two to the side, saw a white slender hand which held a mirror of polished silver in such a way that the concealed observer could see without being seen. He stood irresolute, uncertain whether to advance or to take no notice, but even as he hesitated the mirror was whipped in, and a tall and stately young lady swept out from behind the oaken screen, with the dancing light of mischief in her eyes. Alleyne started with astonishment as he recognized the very maiden who had suffered from his brother's violence in the forest. She no longer wore her gay riding dress, however, but was attired in a long sweeping robe of black velvet of Bruges, with delicate tracery of white lace at neck and at wrist, scarce to be seen against her ivory skin. Beautiful as she had seemed to him before, the lithe charm of her figure and the proud, free grace of her bearing were enhanced now by the rich simplicity of her attire. "Ah, you start," said she, with the same sidelong look of mischief, "and I cannot marvel at it. Didst not look to see the distressed damsel again? Oh that I were a minstrel, that I might put it into rhyme with the whole romance, the luckless maid, the wicked socman, and the virtuous clerk. So might our fame have gone down together for all time, and you be numbered with Sir Percival or Sir Galahad, or all the other rescuers of oppressed ladies." "What I did," said Alleyne, "was too small a thing for thanks, and yet, if I may say it without offence, it was too grave and near a matter for mirth and raillery. I had counted on my brother's love, but God has willed that it should be otherwise. It is a joy to me to see you again, lady, and to know that you have reached home in safety, if this be indeed your home." "Yes, in sooth, Castle Twynham is my home, and Sir Nigel Loring my father. I should have told you so this morning, but you said that you were coming thither, so I bethought me that I might hold it back as a surprise to you." "Oh dear, but it was brave to see you!" she cried, bursting out a laughing once more, and standing with a hand pressed to her side and her half closed eyes twinkling with amusement. "You drew back and came forwards with your eyes upon my book there, like the mouse who sniffs the cheese and yet dreads the trap." "I take shame," said Alleyne, "that I should have touched it." "Nay, it warmed my very heart to see it. So glad was I that I laughed for very pleasure. My fine preacher can himself be tempted then, thought I. He is not made of another clay to the rest of us." "God help me, I am the weakest of the weak," groaned Alleyne. "I pray that I have more strength." "And to what end?" she asked sharply. "If you are, as I understand, to shut yourself forever in your cell within the four walls of the abbey, then what use would it be were your prayer to be answered?" "The use of my own salvation." She turned from him with a pretty shrug and wave. "Is that all?" she said. "Then you know better than Father Christopher and the rest of them. Your own, ever your own. My father is the king's man, and when he rides into the press of fight he is not thinking ever of the saving of his own poor body. He recks little enough if he leaves it on the field. Why then should you, who are soldiers of the spirit, be ever moping or hiding in cell or in cave with minds full of your own concerns, while the world, which you should be mending, is going on its way, and neither sees nor hears you? Were you all as thoughtless of your own souls as the soldier is of his body, you would be of more avail to the souls of others." "There is sooth in what you say, lady," Alleyne answered, "and yet I scarce can see what you would have the clergy and the church to do. I would have them live as others and do men's work in the world, preaching by their lives rather than their words. I would have them come forth from their lonely places, mix with the borough folks, feel the pains and the pleasures, the cares and the rewards, the temptings and the stirrings of the common people. Let them toil and swinken and labor and plough the land and take wives themselves." "Alas, alas!" cried Alleyne, aghast. "You have surely sucked this poison from the man Whitcliffe, of whom I have heard such evil things." "Nay, I know him not. I have learned it by looking from my own chamber window and marking these poor monks of the priory, their weary life and their profitless round. I have asked myself if the best which can be done with virtue is to shut it within high walls, as though it were some savage creature. If the good will lock themselves up, and if the wicked will still wander free, then alas for the world!" Alleyne looked at her in astonishment, for her cheek was flushed, her eyes gleaming, and her whole pose full of eloquence and conviction. Yet in an instant she had changed again to her old expression of merriment leavened with mischief. "Wilt do what I ask?" said she. "What is it, lady?" "Oh, most ungallant clerk, a true knight would never have asked, but would have vowed upon the instant. 'Tis but to bear me out on what I say to my father." "In what?" "In saying, if he ask, that it was south of the Christchurch road that I met you. I shall be shut up with a tire woman else, and have a week of spindle and bodkin, when I would fain be galloping Troubadour at Wilverley Walk, or loosing little Roland at the Vinnyrigg herons." "I shall not answer him if he ask." "Not answer! But he will have an answer." "Nay, but you must not fail me, or it will go ill with me." "But, lady," cried poor Alleyne in great distress, "how can I say that it was to the south of the road when I know well that it was 4 miles to the north?" "You will not say it? Surely you will not too, when you know that it was not so." "Oh, I weary of your preaching!" she cried, and swept away with a toss of her beautiful head, leaving Alleyne as cast down and ashamed as though he had himself proposed some infamous thing. She was back again in an instant, however, in another of her varying moods. "Look at that, my friend," said she. "If you had been shut up in abbey or in cell this day, you could not have taught a wayward maiden to abide by the truth. Is that not so? What avail is the shepherd if he leaves his sheep?" "A sorry shepherd," said Alleyne humbly. "But here is your noble father, and you shall see how worthy a pupil I am." "Father, I am much beholden to this young clerk, who was of service to me and helped me this very morning in Minstead Woods, 4 miles to the north of the Christchurch road, where I had no call to be, you having ordered it otherwise." All this she reeled off in a loud voice, and then glanced with sidelong, questioning eyes at Alleyne for his approval. Sir Nigel, who had entered the room with a silvery haired old lady upon his arm, stared aghast at this sudden outburst of candor. "Maude, Maude," said he, shaking his head, "it is more hard for me to gain obedience from you than from 10 score drunken archers who followed me to Guienne. Yet hush, little one, for your fair lady mother will be here anon, and there is no need that she should know it. We will keep you from the provost marshal this journey. Away to your chamber, sweeting, and keep a blithe face, for she who confesses is shriven. And now, fair mother," he continued, when his daughter had gone, "sit you here by the fire, for your blood runs colder than it did. Alleyne Edricson, I would have a word with you, for I would fain that you should take service under me. And here in good time comes my lady, without whose counsel it is not my wont to decide aught of import. But indeed it was her own thought that you should come. For I have formed a good opinion of you, and can see that you are one who may be trusted," said the Lady Loring. "And in good sooth,
My dear lord hath need of such a one by his side, for he recks so little of himself that there should be one there to look to his needs and meet his wants. You have seen the cloisters, it were well that you should see the world too ere you make your choice for life between them." "It was for that very reason that my father willed it that I should come forth into the world at my 20th year," said Alleyne. "Then your father was a man of good counsel," said she, "and you cannot carry out his will better than by going on this path, where all that is noble and gallant in England will be your companions." "You can ride?" asked Sir Nigel, looking at the youth with puckered eyes. "Yes, I have ridden much at the Abbey. Yet there is a difference betwixt a friar's hack and a warrior's destrier. You can sing and play?" "On citole, flute, and rebeck." "Good. You can read blazonry?" "Indifferently well." "Then read this," quoth Sir Nigel, pointing upwards to one of the many quarterings which adorned the wall over the fireplace. "Argent," Alleyne answered, "a fess azure charged with 3 lozenges dividing 3 mullets sable. Over all, on an escutcheon of the first, a jambe gules." "A jambe gules erased," said Sir Nigel, shaking his head solemnly. "Yet it was not amiss for a monk bred man. I trust you are lowly and serviceable?" "I have served all my life, my lord." "Canst carve too?" "I have carved 2 days a week for the brethren." "A model truly. Wilt make a squire of squires. But tell me, I pray, canst curl hair?" "No, my lord, but I could learn." "It is of import," said he, "for I love to keep my hair well ordered, seeing that the weight of my helmet for 30 years hath in some degree frayed it upon the top." He pulled off his velvet cap of maintenance as he spoke, and displayed a pate which was as bald as an egg and shone bravely in the firelight. "You see," said he, whisking round and showing one little strip where a line of scattered hairs, like the last survivors in some fatal field, still barely held their own against the fate which had fallen upon their comrades, "these locks need some little oiling and curling, for I doubt not that if you look slantwise at my head, when the light is good, you will yourself perceive that there are places where the hair is sparse." "It is for you also to bear the purse," said the lady, "for my sweet lord is of so free and gracious a temper that he would give it gaily to the first who asked alms of him. All these things, with some knowledge of venery and of the management of horse, hawk, and hound, with the grace and hardihood and courtesy which are proper to your age, will make you a fit squire for Sir Nigel Loring." "Alas, lady," Alleyne answered, "I know well the great honor that you have done me in deeming me worthy to wait upon so renowned a knight, yet I am so conscious of my own weakness that I can scarce dare incur duties which I might be so ill fitted to fulfil." "Modesty and a humble mind," said she, "are the very first and rarest gifts in page or squire. Your words prove that you have these, and all the rest is but the work of use and time. But there is no call for haste. Rest upon it for the night, and let your orisons ask for guidance in the matter. We knew your father well, and would fain help his son, though we have small cause to love your brother the Socman, who is forever stirring up strife in the county." "We can scarce hope," said Sir Nigel, "to have all ready for our start before the feast of St. Luke, for there is much to be done in the time. You will have leisure, therefore, if it please you to take service under me, in which to learn your devoir. Bertrand, my daughter's page, is hot to go, but in sooth he is over young for such rough work as may be before us." "And I have one favor to crave from you," added the lady of the castle, as Alleyne turned to leave their presence. "You have, as I understand, much learning which you have acquired at Beaulieu." "Little enough, lady, compared with those who were my teachers." "Yet enough for my purpose, I doubt not, for I would have you give an hour or two a day, whilst you are with us, in discoursing with my daughter, the Lady Maude, for she is somewhat backward, I fear, and hath no love of letters, save for these poor fond romances which do but fill her empty head with dreams of enchanted maidens and of errant cavaliers. Father Christopher comes over after nones from the priory, but he is stricken with years and slow of speech, so that she gets small profit from his teaching. I would have you do what you can with her, and with Agatha, my young tirewoman, and with Dorothy Pierpont." And so Alleyne found himself not only chosen as squire to a knight, but also as squire to three damosels, which was even further from the part which he had thought to play in the world. Yet he could not but agree to do what he might, and so went forth from the castle hall with his face flushed and his head in a whirl at the thought of the strange and perilous paths which his feet were destined to tread. End of chapter 11. Of the White Company. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Clive Catterall. The White Company by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Chapter 12. How Alleyne learned more than he could teach. And now there came a time of stir and bustle, of furbishing of arms and clang of hammer from all the Southland counties. Fast spread the tidings from thorpe to thorpe and from castle to castle that the old game was afoot once more, and the lions and lilies to be in the field with the early spring. Great news this for that fierce old country, whose trade for a generation had been war, her exports archers, and her imports prisoners. For 6 years her sons had chafed under an unwonted peace. Now they flew to their arms as to their birthright. The old soldiers of Crecy, of Nogent, and of Poitiers were glad to think that they might hear the war trumpet once more, and gladder still were the hot youth who had chafed for years under the martial tales of their sires. To pierce the great mountains of the south, to fight the tamers of the fiery moors, to follow the greatest captain of the age, to find sunny cornfields and vineyards when the marches of Picardy and Normandy were as rare and bleak as the Jedburgh forests. Here was a golden prospect for a race of warriors. From sea to sea there was stringing of bows in the cottage and clang of steel in the castle. Nor did it take long for every stronghold to pour forth its cavalry and every hamlet its footmen. Through the late autumn and the early winter every road and country lane resounded with nacre and trumpet, with the neigh of the war horse and the clatter of marching men. From the Wrekin in the Welsh marches to the Cotswolds in the west or Butser in the south, there was no hilltop from which the peasant might not have seen the bright shimmer of arms, the toss and flutter of plume and of pensil. From bypath, from woodland clearing, or from winding moorside track, these little rivulets of steel united in the larger roads to form a broader stream, growing ever fuller and larger as it approached the nearest or most commodious seaport. And there all day and day after day there was bustle and crowding and labor, while the great ships loaded up, and one after the other spread their white pinions and darted off to the open sea amid the clash of cymbals and rolling of drums and lusty shouts of those who went and of those who waited. From Orwell to the Dart there was no port which did not send forth its little fleet, gay with streamer and bunting, as for a joyous festival. Thus, in the season of the waning days, the might of England put forth onto the waters. In the ancient and populous county of Hampshire there was no lack of leaders or of soldiers for a service which promised either honor or profit. In the north the Saracen's Head of the Brocas and the Scarlet Fish of the De Roche were waving over a strong body of archers from Holt, Woolmer, and Harewood forests. De Borhunt was up in the east, and Sir John de Montague in the west. Sir Luc de Poigne, Sir Thomas West, Sir Maurice de Bruin, Sir Arthur Lipscombe, Sir Walter Ramsay, and stout Sir Oliver Buttesthorn were all marching south with levies from Andover, Alresford, Odiham, and Winchester, while from Sussex came Sir John Clinton, Sir Thomas Chain, and Sir John Falsley, with a troop of picked men at arms making for their port at Southampton. Greatest of all the musters, however, was that of Twynham Castle, for the name and the fame of Sir Nigel Loring drew towards him the keenest and boldest spirits, all eager to serve under so valiant a leader. Archers from the New Forest and the Forest of Bere, billmen from the peasant country, which is watered by the Stour, the Avon, and the Itchen, young cavaliers from the ancient Hampshire houses, all were pushing for Christchurch to take service under the banner of the five Scarlet Roses. And now, could Sir Nigel have shown the bachelle of land which the laws of rank required, he might well have cut his forked pennon into a square banner, and taken such a following into the field as would have supported the dignity of a banneret. But poverty was heavy upon him. His land was scant, his coffers empty, and the very castle which covered him the holding of another. Sore was his heart when he saw rare bowmen and war hardened spearmen turned away from his gates for the lack of the money which might equip and pay them. Yet the letter which Aylward had brought him gave him powers which he was not slow to use. In it Sir Claude Latour, the Gascon lieutenant of the White Company, assured him that there remained in his keeping enough to fit out 100 archers and 20 men at arms, which, joined to the 300 veteran companions already in France, would make a force which any leader might be proud to command. Carefully and sagaciously the veteran knight chose out his men from the swarm of volunteers. Many an anxious consultation he held with Black Simon, Sam Aylward, and other of his more experienced followers as to who should come and who should stay. By All Saints' Day, however, ere the last leaves had fluttered to earth in the Wilverley and Holmesley glades, he had filled up his full numbers, and mustered under his banner as stout a following of Hampshire foresters as ever twanged their war bows. 20 men at arms, too, well mounted and equipped, formed the cavalry of the party, while young Peter Terlake of Fareham and Walter Ford of Botley, the martial sons of martial sires, came at their own cost to wait upon Sir Nigel and to share with Alleyne the duties of his squireship.
Yet even after the enrolment there was much to be done ere the party could proceed upon its way. For armor, swords, and lances there was no need to take much forethought, for they were to be had both better and cheaper in Bordeaux than in England. With the longbow, however, it was different. Yew staves indeed might be got in Spain, but it was well to take enough and to spare with them.
Then 3 spare cords should be carried for each bow, with a great store of arrowheads, besides the brigandines of chain mail, the wadded steel caps, and the brassarts or arm guards, which were the proper equipment of the archer. Above all, the women for miles round were hard at work cutting the white surcoats which were the badge of the company, and adorning them with the red lion of St. George upon the centre of the breast. When all was completed and the muster called in the castle yard, the oldest soldier of the French wars was fain to confess that he had never looked upon a better equipped or more warlike body of men, from the old knight with his silk jupon sitting his great black war horse in the front of them, to Hordle John, the giant recruit, who leaned carelessly upon a huge black bowstave in the rear. Of the 60, fully half had seen service before, while a fair sprinkling were men who had followed the wars all their lives, and had a hand in those battles which had made the whole world ring with the fame and the wonder of the island infantry. 6 long weeks were taken in these preparations, and it was close on Martinmas ere all was ready for a start. Nigh 2 months had Alleyne Edricson been in Castle Twynham, months which were fated to turn the whole current of his life, to divert it from that dark and lonely bourne towards which it tended, and to guide it into freer and more sunlit channels. Already he had learned to bless his father for that wise provision which had made him seek to know the world ere he had ventured to renounce it.
For it was a different place from that which he had pictured, very different from that which he had heard described when the master of the novices held forth to his charges upon the ravening wolves who lurked for them beyond the peaceful folds of Beaulieu. There was cruelty in it, doubtless, and lust and sin and sorrow, but were there not virtues to atone, robust, positive virtues, which did not shrink from temptation, which held their own in all the rough blasts of the workaday world? How colorless, by contrast, appeared the sinlessness which came from inability to sin, the conquest which was attained by flying away from the enemy! Monk bred as he was, Alleyne had native shrewdness and a mind which was young enough to form new conclusions and to outgrow old ones. He could not fail to see that the men with whom he was thrown into contact, rough tongued, fierce and quarrelsome as they were yet of deeper nature and of more service in the world than the ox eyed brethren who rose and ate and slept from year's end to year's end in their own narrow stagnant circle of existence. Abbot Berghersh was a good man, but how was he better than this kindly knight, who lived as simple a life, held as lofty and inflexible an ideal of duty, and did with all his fearless heart whatever came to his hand to do? In turning from the service of the one to that of the other, Alleyne could not feel that he was lowering his aims in life. True that his gentle and thoughtful nature recoiled from the grim work of war, yet in those days of martial orders and militant brotherhoods there was no gulf fixed betwixt the priest and the soldier. The man of God and the man of the sword might without scandal be united in the same individual. Why then should he, a mere clerk, have scruples when so fair a chance lay in his way of carrying out the spirit as well as the letter of his father's provision? Much struggle it cost him, anxious spirit questionings and midnight prayings, with many a doubt and a misgiving. But the issue was that ere he had been 3 days in Castle Twynham he had taken service under Sir Nigel, and had accepted horse and harness, the same to be paid for out of his share of the profits of the expedition. Henceforth, for 7 hours a day, he strove in the tilt yard to qualify himself to be a worthy squire to so worthy a knight. Young, supple and active, with all the pent energies from years of pure and healthy living, it was not long before he could manage his horse and his weapon well enough to earn an approving nod from critical men at arms, or to hold his own against Terlake and Ford, his fellow servitors. But were there no other considerations which swayed him from the cloisters towards the world? So complex is the human spirit that it can itself scarce discern the deep springs which impel it to action. Yet to Alleyne had been opened now a side of life of which he had been as innocent as a child, but one which was of such deep import that it could not fail to influence him in choosing his path. A woman, in monkish precepts, had been the embodiment and concentration of what was dangerous and evil, a focus whence spread all that was to be dreaded and avoided. So defiling was their presence that a true Cistercian might not raise his eyes to their face or touch their finger tips on ban of church and fear of deadly sin. Yet here, day after day, for an hour after nones, and for an hour before vespers, he found himself in close communion with 3 maidens, all young, all fair, and all therefore doubly dangerous from the monkish standpoint. Yet he found that in their presence he was conscious of a quick sympathy, a pleasant ease, a ready response to all that was most gentle and best in himself, which filled his soul with a vague and new found joy. And yet the Lady Maude Loring was no easy pupil to handle. An older and more world wise man might have been puzzled by her varying moods, her sudden prejudices, her quick resentment at all constraint and authority. Did a subject interest her, was there space in it for either romance or imagination, she would fly through it with her subtle active mind, leaving her 2 fellow students and even her teacher toiling behind her. On the other hand, were there dull patience needed with steady toil and strain of memory, no single fact could by any driving be fixed in her mind. Alleyne might talk to her of the stories of old gods and heroes, of gallant deeds and lofty aims, or he might hold forth upon moon and stars, and let his fancy wander over the hidden secrets of the universe, and he would have had a rapt listener, with flushed cheeks and eloquent eyes, who could repeat after him the very words which had fallen from his lips. But when it came to Almagest and astrolabe, and counting off figures and reckoning of epicycles, away would go her thoughts to horse and hound, and a vacant eye and a listless face would warn the teacher that he had lost his hold upon his scholar. Then He had but to bring out the old romance book from the priory, with befingered cover of sheepskin and gold letters upon a purpling ground, to entice her wayward mind back to the paths of learning. At times, too, when the wild fit was upon her, she would break into pertness and rebel openly against Alleyne's gentle firmness. Yet he would jog quietly on with his teachings, taking no heed to her mutiny, until suddenly she would be conquered by his patience and break into self revilings 100 times stronger than her fault demanded. It chanced, however, that on one of these mornings, when the evil mood was upon her, Agatha, the young tire woman, thinking to please her mistress, began also to toss her head and make tart rejoinder to the teacher's questions. In an instant Lady Maude had turned upon her two blazing eyes and a face which was blanched with anger. "You would dare!" said she. "You would dare!" The frightened tire woman tried to excuse herself. "But, my fair lady," she stammered, "what have I done? I have said no more than I heard." "You would dare!" repeated the lady in a choking voice. "You, a graceless baggage, a foolish lack brain, with no thought above the hemming of shifts, and he so kindly and handy and long suffering. You would ha! You may well flee the room." She had spoken with a rising voice and a clasping and opening of her long white fingers, so that it was no marvel that ere the speech was over the skirts of Agatha were whisking round the door, and the click of her sobs to be heard dying swiftly away down the corridor. Alleyne stared open eyed at this tigress who had sprung so suddenly to his rescue. "There is no need for such anger," he said mildly. "The maid's words have done me no scathe. It is you yourself who have erred." "I know it," she cried. "I am a most wicked woman, but it is bad enough that one should misuse you. Ma foi, I will see that there is not a second one." "Nay, nay, no one has misused me," he answered. "But the fault lies in your hot and bitter words. You have called her a baggage and a lack brain, and I know not what." "And you are he who taught me to speak the truth," she cried. "Now I have spoken it, and yet I cannot please you. Lack brain she is, and lack brain I shall call her." Such was a sample of the sudden janglings which marred the peace of that little class. As the weeks passed, however, they became fewer and less violent, as Alleyne's firm and constant nature gained sway and influence over the Lady Maude. And yet, sooth to say, there were times when he had to ask himself whether it was not the Lady Maude who was gaining sway and influence over him. If she were changing, so was he. In drawing her up from the world, he was day by day being himself dragged down towards it. In vain he strove and reasoned with himself as to the madness of letting his mind rest upon Sir Nigel's daughter. What was he? A younger son, a penniless clerk, a squire unable to pay for his own harness, that he should dare to raise his eyes to the fairest maid in Hampshire? So spake reason, but in spite of all, her voice was ever in his ears and her image in his heart. Stronger than reason, stronger than cloister teachings, stronger than all that might hold him back, was that old tyrant who will brook no rival in the kingdom of youth. And yet it was a surprise and a shock to himself to find how deeply she had entered into his life, how completely those vague ambitions and yearnings which had filled his spiritual nature centred themselves now upon this thing of earth. He had scarce dared to face the change which had come upon him, when a few sudden chance words showed it all up hard and clear, like a lightning flash in the darkness. He had ridden over to Poole one November day with his fellow squire Peter Terlake, in quest of certain yew staves from Wat Swathling, the Dorsetshire armourer. The day for their departure had almost come, and the two youths spurred it over the lonely downs at the top of their speed on their homeward course, for evening had fallen and there was much to be done. Peter was a hard, wiry, brown faced, country bred lad, who looked on the coming war as the schoolboy looks on his holidays. This day, however, he had been sombre and mute, with scarce a word a mile to bestow upon his comrade. "Tell me, Alleyne Edricson," he broke out suddenly, as they clattered along the winding track which leads over the Bournemouth hills, "has it not seemed to you that of late the Lady Maude is paler and more silent than is her wont?" "It may be so." the other answered shortly, and would sit rather distraught by her oriel than ride gaily to the chase as of old. Methinks, Alleyne, it is this learning which you have taught her that has taken all the life and sap from her. It is more than she can master, like a heavy spear to a light rider. Her lady mother has so ordered it," said Alleyne. "By Our Lady, and withouten disrespect," quoth Terlake, "it is in my mind that her lady mother is more fitted to lead a company to a storming than to have the upbringing of this tender and milk white maid. Hark ye, lad Alleyne, to what I have never told man or woman yet. I love the fair Lady Maude, and would give the last drop of my heart's blood to serve her." He spoke with a gasping voice, and his face flushed crimson in the moonlight. Alleyne said nothing, but his heart seemed to have turned to a lump of ice in his bosom. "My father has broad acres," the other continued, "from Fareham Creek to the slope of the Portsdown Hill. There is filling of granges, hewing of wood, malting of grain, and herding of sheep as much as heart could wish, and I the only son. Sure am I that Sir Nigel would be blithe at such a match." "But how of the lady?" asked Alleyne, with dry lips. "Ah, lad, there lies my trouble. It is a toss of the head and a droop of the eyes if I say one word of what is in my mind. 'Twere as easy to woo the snow dame that we shaped last winter in our castle yard. I did but ask her yesternight for her green veil, that I might bear it as a token or lambrequin upon my helm. But she flashed out at me that she kept it for a better man, and then all in a breath asked pardon for that she had spoke so rudely. Yet she would not take back the words either, nor would she grant the veil. Has it seemed to thee, Alleyne, that she loves any one?" "Nay, I cannot say," said Alleyne, with a wild throb of sudden hope in his heart. "I have thought so, and yet I cannot name the man. Indeed, save myself and Walter Ford, and you, who are half a clerk, and Father Christopher of the Priory, and Bertrand the page, who is there whom she sees?" "I cannot tell," quoth Alleyne shortly, and the two squires rode on again, each intent upon his own thoughts. Next day, at morning lesson, the teacher observed that his pupil was indeed looking pale and jaded, with listless eye and a weary manner. He was heavy hearted to note the grievous change in her. "Your mistress, I fear, is ill, Agatha," he said to the tire woman when the Lady Maude had sought her chamber. The maid looked aslant at him with laughing eyes. "It is not an illness that kills," quoth she. "Pray God, not!" he cried. "But tell me, Agatha, what is it that ails her?" "Methinks that I could lay my hand upon another who is smitten with the same trouble," said she, with the same sidelong look. "Canst not give a name to it, and thou so skilled in leechcraft?" "Nay, save that she seems aweary. Well, bethink you that it is but 3 days ere you will all be gone, and Castle Twynham be as dull as the Priory. Is there not enough there to cloud a lady's brow?" "In sooth, yes," he answered. "I had forgot that she is about to lose her father." "Her father!" cried the tire woman, with a little trill of laughter. "Oh, simple, simple!" And she was off down the passage like an arrow from a bow, while Alleyne stood gazing after her, betwixt hope and doubt, scarce daring to put faith in the meaning which seemed to underlie her words. Chapter 12. The White Company. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Clive Catterall. The White Company by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Chapter 13. How the White Company set forth to the wars. St. Luke's Day had come and gone, and it was the season of Martinmas, when the oxen are driven into their slaughter, that the White Company was ready for its journey. Loud shrieked the brazen bugles from keep and from gateway, and merry was the rattle of the war drum as the men gathered in the outer bailey with torches to light them, for the morn had not yet broken. Alleyne,
from the window of the armory, looked down upon the strange scene. The circles of yellow flickering light, the lines of stern and bearded faces, the quick shimmer of arms, and the lean heads of the horses. In front stood the bowmen, 10 deep, with a fringe of under officers, who paced hither and thither, marshalling the ranks with curt precept or short rebuke. Behind were the little clump of steel clad horsemen, their lances raised, with long pencils drooping down the oaken shafts. So silent and still were they that it might have been metal sheathed statues, were it not for the occasional quick, impatient stamp of their chargers, or the rattle of chamfron against neck plates as they tossed and strained. A spear's length in front of them sat the spare and long limbed figure of Black Simon, the Norwich fighting man, his fierce, deep lined face framed in steel, and the silk guidon marked with the 5 scarlet roses slanting over his right shoulder. All round, in the edge of the circle of light, stood the castle servants, the soldiers who were to form the garrison, and little knots of women, who sobbed in their aprons and called shrilly to their name saints to watch over the Wat, or Will, or Peterkin, who had turned his hand to the work of war.
The young squire was leaning forward, gazing at the stirring and martial scene, when he heard a short, quick gasp at his shoulder, and there was the Lady Maude, with her hand to her heart, leaning up against the wall, slender and fair like a half plucked lily. Her face was turned away from him, but he could see by the sharp intake of her breath that she was weeping bitterly. "Alas, alas!" he cried, all unnerved at the sight. "Why is it that you are so sad, lady?" It is the sight of these brave men," she answered, "and to think how many of them go, and how few are likely to find their way back. I have seen it before, when I was a little maid, in the year of the prince's great battle. I remember how they mustered in the bailey, even as they do now, and my lady mother holding me in her arms at this very window, that I might see the show." "Please God, you will see them all back ere another year be out," said he. She shook her head, looking round at him with flushed cheeks and eyes that sparkled in the lamplight. "Oh, I hate myself for being a woman!" she cried, with a stamp of her little foot. "What can I do that is good? Here I must bide, and talk and sew and spin and spin and sew and talk, ever the same dull round, with nothing at the end of it. And now you are going too, who could carry my thoughts out of these grey walls, and raise my mind above tapestry and distaffs. What can I do? I am of no more use or value than that broken bowstave." "You are of such value to me," he cried, in a whirl of passionate words, "that all else has become naught. You are my heart, my life, my one and only thought. Oh, Maude, I cannot live without you. I cannot leave you without a word of love. All is changed to me since I have known you. I am poor and lowly, and all unworthy of you, but if great love may weigh down such defects, then mine may do it. Give me but one word of hope to take to the wars with me, but one. Ah, you shrink, you shudder. My wild words have frightened you." Twice she opened her lips, and twice no sound came from them. At last she spoke in a hard and measured voice, as one who dare not trust herself to speak too freely. "This is over sudden," she said. "It is not so long since the world was nothing to you. You have changed once, perchance you may change again." "Cruel!" he cried. "Who hath changed me?" "And then your brother," she continued with a little laugh, disregarding his question. "Methinks this hath become a family custom amongst the Edricsons." "Nay, I am sorry. I did not mean a jibe. But indeed, Alleyne, this hath come suddenly upon me, and I scarce know what to say."
"Say some word of hope, however distant, some kind word that I may cherish in my heart." "Nay, Alleyne, it were a cruel kindness, and you have been too good and true a friend to me that I should use you despitefully. There cannot be a closer link between us. It is madness to think of it. Were there no other reasons, it is enough that my father and your brother would both cry out against it." "My brother, what has he to do with it? And your father?" "Come, Alleyne, was it not you who would have me act fairly to all men, and certes to my father amongst them?" "You say truly," he cried. "You say truly.
But you do not reject me, Maude. You give me some ray of hope. I do not ask pledge or promise. Say only that I am not hateful to you, that on some happier day I may hear kinder words from you." Her eyes softened upon him, and a kind of answer was on her lips, when a hoarse shout, with the clatter of arms and stamping of steeds, rose up from the bailey below. At the sound her face set, her eyes sparkled, and she stood with a flushed cheek and head thrown back, a woman's body with a soul of fire. "My father hath gone down," she cried. "Your place is by his side. Nay, look not at me, Alleyne. It is no time for dallying. Win my father's love, and all may follow. It is when the brave soldier hath done his devoir that he hopes for his reward. Farewell, and may God be with you." She held out her white, slim hand to him, but as he bent his lips over it she whisked away and was gone, leaving in his outstretched hand the very green veil for which poor Peter Terlake had craved in vain. Again the hoarse cheering burst out from below, and he heard the clang of the rising portcullis. Pressing the veil to his lips, he thrust it into the bosom of his tunic, and rushed as fast as feet could bear him to arm himself and join the muster. The raw morning had broken ere the hot spiced ale had been served round and the last farewell spoken. A cold wind blew up from the sea, and ragged clouds drifted swiftly across the sky. The Christchurch townsfolk stood huddled about the bridge of Avon, the women pulling tight their shawls and the men swathing themselves in their gabardines, while down the winding path from the castle came the van of the little army, their feet clanging on the hard frozen road. First came Black Simon with his banner, bestriding a lean and powerful dapple grey charger, as hard and wiry and war wise as himself. After him, riding three abreast, were 9 men at arms, all picked soldiers who had followed the French wars before, and knew the marches of Picardy as they knew the downs of their native Hampshire. They were armed to the teeth with lance, sword, and mace, with square shields notched at the upper right hand corner to serve as a spear rest. For defence each man wore a coat of interlaced leathern thongs, strengthened at the shoulder, elbow, and upper arms with slips of steel. Greaves and knee pieces were also of leather backed by steel, and their gauntlets and shoes were of iron plates craftily jointed. So, with jingle of arms and clatter of hoofs, they strode across the bridge of Avon, while the burghers shouted lustily for the flag of the Five Roses and its gallant guard. Close at the heels of the horses came 20 archers, bearded and burly, their round targets on their backs and their long yellow bows, the most deadly weapon that the wit of man had yet devised, thrusting forth from behind their shoulders. From each man's girdle hung sword or axe, according to his humor, and over the right hip there jutted out the leathern quiver with its bristle of goose, pigeon, and peacock feathers. Behind the bowmen strode 2 trumpeters blowing upon nakers, and 2 drummers in parti colored clothes. After them came 27 sumpter horses, carrying tent poles, cloth, spare arms, spurs, wedges, cooking kettles, horseshoes, bags of nails, and 100 other things which experience had shown to be needful in a harried and hostile country. A white mule with red trappings, led by a varlet, carried Sir Nigel's own napery and table comforts. Then came 20 more archers, 10 more men at arms, and finally a rear guard of 20 bowmen, with Big John towering in the front rank, and the veteran Aylward marching by the side, his battered harness and faded surcoat in strange contrast with the snow white jupons and shining brigandines of his companions. A quick crossfire of greetings and questions and rough West Saxon jests flew from rank to rank, or were bandied about betwixt the marching archers and the gazing crowd. "Hola, Gaffer Higginson!" cried Aylward, as he spied the portly figure of the village innkeeper. "No more of thy nut brown, mon gar. We leave it behind us." "By St. Paul, no!" cried the other. "You take it with you. Devil a drop have you left in the great Kilderkin. It was time for you to go."
"If your cask is leer, I warrant your purse is full, Gaffer," shouted Hordle John. "See that you lay in good store of the best for our homecoming."
"See that you keep your throat whole for the drinking of it, archer," cried a voice, and the crowd laughed at the rough pleasantry.
"If you will warrant the beer, I will warrant the throat," said John composedly. "Close up the ranks," cried Aylward. "En avant, mes enfants! Ah, by my finger bones, there is my sweet Mary from the Priory Mill. Ma foi, but she is beautiful. Adieu, Mary, ma cherie. Mon coeur est toujours à toi. Brace your belt, Watkin, man, and swing your shoulders as a free companion should. By my hilt, your jerkin will be as dirty as mine ere you clap eyes on Hengistbury Head again."
The company had marched to the turn of the road ere Sir Nigel Loring rode out from the gateway, mounted on Pommers, his great black war horse, whose ponderous footfall on the wooden drawbridge echoed loudly from the gloomy arch which spanned it. Sir Nigel was still in his velvet dress of peace, with flat velvet cap of maintenance and curling ostrich feather clasped in a golden brooch. To his three squires riding behind him it looked as though he bore the bird's egg as well as its feather, for the back of his bald pate shone like a globe of ivory. He bore no arms save the long and heavy sword which hung at his saddle bow, but Terlake carried in front of him the high wiven crested bassinet, Ford the heavy ash spear with swallow tail pennon, while Alleyne was entrusted with the emblazoned shield. The Lady Loring rode her palfrey at her lord's bridle arm, for she would see him as far as the edge of the forest, and ever and anon she turned her hard lined face up wistfully to him, and ran a questioning eye over his apparel and appointments. "I trust that there is nothing forgot," she said, beckoning to Alleyne to ride on her further side. "I trust him to you, Edricson. Hosen, shirts, cyclas and underjupon are in the brown basket on the left hand side of the mule. His wine he takes hot when the nights are cold, malvoisie or vernage with as much spice as would cover the thumbnail. See that he hath a change if he come back hot from the tilting. There is goose grease in a box if the old scars ache at the turn of the weather. Let his blankets be dry, and " "Nay, my heart's life," the little knight interrupted, "trouble not now about such matters. Why so pale and wan, Edricson? Is it not enow to make a man's heart dance to see this noble company? Such valiant men at arms, such lusty archers. By St. Paul! I would be ill to please if I were not blithe to see the red roses flying at the head of so noble a following." "The purse I have already given you, Edricson," continued the lady. "There are in it 23 marks, 1 noble, 3 shillings and 4 pence, which is a great treasure for one man to carry. And I pray you to bear it in mind, Edricson, that he hath 2 pairs of shoes, those of red leather for common use, and the others with golden toe chains, which he may wear should he chance to drink wine with the prince or with Chandos." "My sweet bird," said Sir Nigel, "I am right loath to part from you, but we are now at the fringe of the forest, and it is not right that I should take the chatelaine too far from her trust." "But oh, my dear lord," she cried, with a trembling lip, "let me bide with you for 1 furlong further, or 1½ perhaps. You may spare me this out of the weary miles that you will journey along." "Come then, my heart's comfort," he answered. "But I must crave a gage from thee. It is my custom, dearling, and hath been since I have first known thee, to proclaim by herald in such camps, townships, or fortalices as I may chance to visit, that my lady love being beyond compare the fairest and sweetest in Christendom, I should deem it great honor and kindly condescension if any cavalier would run 3 courses against me with sharpened lances, should he chance to have a lady whose claim he was willing to advance. I pray you then, my fair dove, that you will vouchsafe to me one of those doeskin gloves, that I may wear it as the badge of her whose servant I shall ever be." "Alack and alas for the fairest and sweetest!" she cried. "Fair and sweet I would fain be for your sake, my lord, but old I am and ugly, and the knights would laugh should you lay lance in rest in such a cause." "Edricson," quoth Sir Nigel, "you have young eyes, and mine are somewhat bedimmed. Should you chance to see a knight laugh or smile, or even, look you, arch his brows or purse his mouth, or in any way show surprise that I should uphold the Lady Mary, you will take particular note of his name, his coat armor, and his lodging. Your glove, my life's desire." The Lady Mary Loring slipped her hand from her yellow leather gauntlet, and he, lifting it with dainty reverence, bound it to the front of his velvet cap. "It is with mine other guardian angels," quoth he, pointing at the saints' medals which hung beside it. "And now, my dearest, you have come far enow. May the Virgin guard and prosper thee. One kiss." He bent down from his saddle, and then,
Striking spurs into his horse's sides, he galloped at top speed after his men, with his three squires at his heels. Half a mile further, where the road topped a hill, they looked back, and the Lady Mary on her white palfrey was still there where they had left her. A moment later they were on the downward slope, and she had vanished from their view. Chapter 13.
The White Company. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Clive Catterall. The White Company by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Chapter 14. How Sir Nigel sought for a wayside venture. For a time Sir Nigel was very moody and downcast, with bent brows and eyes upon the pommel of his saddle. Edricson and Terlake rode behind him in little better case, while Ford, a careless and light-hearted youth, grinned at the melancholy of his companions and flourished his lord's heavy spear, making a point to the right and a point to the left, as though he were a paladin contending against a host of assailants. Sir Nigel happened, however, to turn himself in his saddle. Ford instantly became as stiff and as rigid as though he had been struck with a palsy. The four rode alone, for the archers had passed a curve in the road, though Alleyne could still hear the heavy clump clump of their marching, or catch a glimpse of the sparkle of steel through the tangle of leafless branches. "Ride by my side, friends, I entreat of you," said the knight, reining in his steed that they might come abreast of him. "For since it hath pleased you to follow me to the wars, it were well that you should know how you may best serve me. I doubt not, Terlake, that you will show yourself a worthy son of a valiant father, and you, Ford, of yours, and you, Edricson, that you are mindful of the old time house from which all men know that you are sprung. And first I would have you bear very steadfastly in mind that our setting forth is by no means for the purpose of gaining spoil or extracting ransom, though it may well happen that such may come to us also. We go to France, and from thence, I trust, to Spain, in humble search of a field in which we may win advancement and perchance some small share of glory. For this purpose I would have you know that it is not my wont to let any occasion pass where it is in any way possible that honor may be gained. I would have you bear this in mind, and give great heed to it, that you may bring me word of all cartels, challenges, wrongs, tyrannies, infamies, and wronging of damsels. Nor is any occasion too small to take note of, for I have known such trifles as the dropping of a gauntlet or the flicking of a bread crumb, when well and properly followed up, lead to a most noble spear running. But, Edricson, do I not see a cavalier who rides down yonder road among the nether shore? It would be well, perchance, that you should give him greeting from me, and should he be of gentle blood, it may be that he would care to exchange thrusts with me." "Why, my lord," quoth Ford, standing in his stirrups and shading his eyes, "it is old Hob Davidson, the fat miller of Milton." "Ah, so it is indeed," said Sir Nigel, puckering his cheeks. "But wayside ventures are not to be scorned, for I have seen no finer passages than are to be had from such chance meetings, when cavaliers are willing to advance themselves. I can well remember that 2 leagues from the town of Rheims I met a very valiant and courteous cavalier of France, with whom I had gentle and most honorable contention for upwards of an hour. It hath ever grieved me that I had not his name, for he smote upon me with a mace and went upon his way ere I was in condition to have much speech with him. But his arms were an allurion in chief above a fess azure. I was also on such an occasion thrust through the shoulder by Leon de Moncourt, whom I met on the high road betwixt Libourne and Bordeaux. I met him but the once, but I have never seen a man for whom I bear a greater love and esteem. And also with the squire Le Bourg Capillet, who would have been a very valiant captain had he lived." "He is dead, then?" asked Alleyne Edricson. Alas, it was my ill fate to slay him in a bickering which broke out in a field near the township of Tarbes. I cannot call to mind how the thing came about, for it was in the year of the prince's ride through Languedoc, when there was much fine skirmishing to be had at barriers. By St. Paul! I do not think that any honorable cavalier could ask for better chance of advancement than might be had by spurring forth before the army, and riding to the gateways of Narbonne or Bergerac or Montgiscard, where some courteous gentleman would ever be in wait to do what he might to meet your wish or to ease you of your vow. Such a one at Ventadour ran 3 courses with me betwixt daybreak and sunrise, to the great exultation of his lady." "And did you slay him also, my lord?" asked Ford with reverence. "I could never learn, for he was carried within the barrier, and as I had chanced to break the bone of my leg, it was a great unease for me to ride, or even to stand. Yet by the goodness of Heaven and the pious intercession of the valiant St. George, I was able to sit my charger in the ruffle at Poitiers, which was no very long time afterwards. But what have we here? A very fair and courtly maiden, or I mistake." It was indeed a tall and buxom country lass, with a basket of spinach leaves upon her head, and a great slab of bacon tucked under one arm. She bobbed a frightened curtsey as Sir Nigel swept his velvet hat from his head and reined up his great charger. "God be with thee, fair maiden," said he. "God guard thee, my lord," she answered, speaking in the broadest West Saxon speech, and balancing herself first on one foot and then on the other in her bashfulness. "Fear not, my fair damsel," said Sir Nigel; "but tell me if perchance a poor and most unworthy knight can in any wise be of service to you. Should it chance that you have been used despitefully, it may be that I may obtain justice for you." "Oh Lord, no, kind sir," she answered, clutching her bacon the tighter, as though some design upon it might be hid under this knightly offer. "I be the milking wench of Farmer Arnold, and he be as kind a master as heart could wish." "It is well," said he, and with a shake of the bridle rode on down the woodland path. "I would have you bear in mind," he continued to his squires, "that gentle courtesy is not, as is the base use of so many false knights, to be shown only to maidens of high degree, for there is no woman so humble that a true knight may not listen to her tale of wrong. But here comes a cavalier who is indeed in haste. Perchance it would be well that we should ask him whither he rides, for it may be that he is one who desires to advance himself in chivalry." The bleak, hard, wind swept road dipped down in front of them into a little valley, and then, writhing up the heathy slope upon the other side, lost itself amongst the gaunt pine trees. Far away between the black lines of trunks the quick glitter of steel marked where the Company pursued its way. To the north stretched the tree country, but to the south, between 2 swelling downs, a glimpse might be caught of the cold gray shimmer of the sea, with a white fleck of a galley sail upon the distant skyline. Just in front of the travellers a horseman was urging his steed up the slope, driving it on with whip and spur, as one who rides for a set purpose. As he clattered up, Alleyne could see that the roan horse was gray with dust and flecked with foam, as though it had left many a mile behind it. The rider was a stern faced man, hard of mouth and dry of eye, with a heavy sword clanking at his side, and a stiff white bundle swathed in linen balanced across the pommel of his saddle. "The king's messenger!" he bawled as he came up to them. "The messenger of the king! Clear the causeway for the king's own man." "Not so loudly, friend," quoth the little knight, reining his horse half round to bar the path. "I have myself been the king's man for 30 years or more, and I have not been wont to halloo about it on a peaceful highway." "I ride in his service," cried the other, "and I carry that which belongs to him. You bar my path at your peril." "Yet I have known the king's enemies claim to ride in his same," said Sir Nigel. "The foul fiend may lurk beneath a garment of light. We must have some sign or warrant of your mission." "Then I must hew a passage," cried the stranger, with his shoulder braced round and his hand upon his hilt. "I am not to be stopped on the king's service by every gadabout." "Should you be a gentleman of quarterings and coat armor," lisped Sir Nigel, "I shall be very blithe to go further into the matter with you. If not, I have 3 very worthy squires, any one of whom would take the thing upon himself and debate it with you in a very honorable way." The man scowled from one to the other, and his hand stole away from his sword. "You ask me for a sign," he said. "Here is a sign for you, since you must have one." As he spoke he whirled the covering from the object in front of him, and showed to their horror that it was a newly severed human leg. "By God's tooth!" he continued, with a brutal laugh, "you ask me if I am a man of quarterings, and it is even so, for I am officer to the verderer's court at Lyndhurst. This thievish leg is to hang at Milton, and the other is already at Brockenhurst, as a sign to all men of what comes of being over fond of venison pasty." "Pshaw!" cried Sir Nigel. "Pass on the other side of the road, fellow, and let us have the wind of you. We shall trot our horses, my friends, across this pleasant valley, for, by Our Lady, a breath of God's fresh air is right welcome after such a sight." "We hoped to snare a falcon," said he presently, "but we netted a carrion crow. Ma foi! but there are men whose hearts are tougher than a boar's hide. For me, I have played the old game of war since ever I had hair on my chin, and I have seen 10,000 brave men in one day with their faces to the sky, but I swear by Him who made me that I cannot abide the work of the butcher." "And yet, my fair lord," said Edricson, "there has, from what I hear, been much of such devil's work in France." "Too much, too much," he answered. "But I have ever observed that the foremost in the field are they who would scorn to mishandle a prisoner. By St. Paul! it is not they who carry the breach who are wont to sack the town, but the laggard knaves who come crowding in when a way has been cleared for them. But what is this among the trees?" "It is a shrine of Our Lady," said Terlake, "and a blind beggar who lives by the alms of those who worship there." "A shrine!" cried the knight. "Then let us put up an orison." Pulling off his cap and clasping his hands, he chanted in a shrill voice: "Benedictus Dominus Deus meus, qui docet manus meas ad proelum et digitos meos ad bellum." A strange figure he seemed to his three squires, perched on his huge horse, with his eyes upturned, and the wintry sun shimmering upon his bald head. "It is a noble prayer," he remarked, putting on his hat again, "and it was taught to me by the noble Chandos himself. But how fares it with you, father? Methinks that I should have ruth upon you, seeing that I am myself like one who looks through a horn window while his neighbors have the clear crystal. Yet, by St. Paul! there is a long stride between a man who hath a horn casement and him who is walled in on every hand." "Alas, fair sir!" cried the blind old man, "I have not seen the blessed blue of heaven this 200 years, since a levin flash burned the sight out of my head." "You have been blind to much that is goodly and fair," quoth Sir Nigel, "but you have also been spared much that is sorry and foul. This very hour our eyes have been shocked with that which would have left you unmoved. But, by St. Paul! we must be on, or our Company will think they have lost their captain somewhat early in the venture. Throw the man my purse, Edricson, and let us go." Alleyne, lingering behind, bethought him of the Lady Loring's counsel, and reduced the noble gift which the knight had so freely bestowed to a single penny, which the beggar with many mumbled blessings thrust away into his wallet. Then, spurring his steed, the young squire rode at the top of his speed after his companions, and overtook them just at the spot where the trees fringe off into the moor, and the straggling hamlet of Hordle lies scattered on either side of the winding and deeply rutted track. The Company was already well nigh through the village, but as the knight and his squires closed up upon them, they heard the clamor of strident voice, followed by a roar of deep chested laughter from the ranks of the archers. Another minute brought them up with the rear guard, where every man marched with his beard on his shoulder and a face which was agrin with merriment. By the side of the column walked a huge red headed bowman, with his hands thrown out in argument and expostulation, while close at his heels followed a little wrinkled woman, who poured forth a shrill volley of abuse, varied by an occasional thwack from her stick, given with all the force of her body, though she might have been beating one of the forest trees for all the effect that she seemed likely to produce. "I trust, Aylward," said Sir Nigel gravely, as he rode up, "that this doth not mean that any violence hath been offered to women. If such a thing happened, I tell you that the man shall hang, though he were the best archer that ever wore brassart." "Nay, my fair lord," Aylward answered with a grin, "it is violence which is offered to a man. He comes from Hordle,
and this is his mother, who hath come forth to welcome him."
"You rammucky lurden!" she was howling, with a blow between each catch of her breath. "You shammocking, yaping, overlong good for nought! I will teach thee, I will baste thee, aye, by my faith!"
"Whist, mother," said John, looking back at her from the tail of his eye. "I go to France as an archer, to give blows and to take them."
"To France, quotha!" cried the old dame. "Bide here with me, and I shall warrant you more blows than you are like to get in France. If blows be what you seek, you need go further than Hordle."
"By my hilt, the good dame speaks truth," said Aylward. "It seems to be the very home of them."
"What have you to say, you clean shaven galley beggar?" cried the fiery dame, turning upon the archer. "Can I not speak with my own son, but you must let your tongue clack? A soldier, quotha, and never a hair on his face. I have seen a better soldier, with a pap for food and swaddling clothes for harness."
"Stand to it, Aylward," cried the archers, amid a fresh burst of laughter. "Do not thwart her, comrade," said big John. "She hath a proper spirit for her years, and cannot abide to be thwarted. It is kindly and homely to me to hear her voice, and to feel that she is behind me. But I must leave you now, mother, for the way is over rough for your feet. But I will bring you back a silken gown, if there be one in France or in Spain, and I will bring Jinny a silver penny. So good bye to you, and God have you in his keeping." Whipping up the little woman, he lifted her lightly to his lips, and then, taking his place in the ranks again, marched on with the laughing company. "That was ever his way," she cried, appealing to Sir Nigel, who reined up his horse and listened with greatest courtesy. "He would jog on his own road for all that I could do to change him. First he must be a monk, forsooth, and all because a wench was wise enough to turn her back on him. Then he joins a rascally crew, and must needs trapse off to the wars. And me with no one to bait the fire if I be out, or tend the cow if I be home. Yet I have been a good mother to him. 3 hazel switches a day have I broken across his shoulders, and he takes no more notice than you have seen him to day." "Doubt not that he will come back to you both safe and prosperous, my fair dame," quoth Sir Nigel. "Meanwhile it grieves me that, as I have already given my purse to a beggar up the road, I—" "Nay, my lord," said Alleyne, "I still have some moneys remaining." "Then I pray you to give them to this very worthy woman." He cantered on as he spoke, while Alleyne, having dispensed 2 more pence, left the old dame standing by the furthest cottage of Hordle, with her shrill voice raised in blessings instead of revilings. There were 2 cross roads before they reached the Lymington ford, and at each of them Sir Nigel pulled up his horse and waited with many a curvet and gambade, craning his neck this way and that to see if fortune would send him a venture. Cross roads had, as he explained, been rare places for knightly spear runnings, and in his youth it was no uncommon thing for a cavalier to abide for weeks at such a point, holding gentle debate with all comers, to his own advancement and the great honor of his lady. The times were changed, however, and the forest tracks wound away from them deserted and silent, with no trample of war horse or clang of armor which might herald the approach of an adversary, so that Sir Nigel rode on his way disconsolate. At the Lymington river they splashed through the ford, and lay in the meadows on the further side to eat the bread and salt meat which they carried upon the sumpter horses. Then, ere the sun was on the slope of the heavens, they had deftly trussed up again, and were swinging merrily upon their way, 200 feet moving like 2. There is a third cross road, where the track from Boulder runs down to the old fishing village of Pitt's Deep. Down this, as they came abreast of it, there walked 2 men, one a pace or 2 behind the other. The cavaliers could not but pull up their horses to look at them, for a stranger pair were never seen journeying together. The first was a misshapen, squalid man, with cruel, cunning eyes and a shock of tangled red hair, bearing in his hands a small unpainted cross, which he held so high that all men might see it. He seemed to be in the last extremity of fright, with a face the color of clay, and his limbs all a shake as one who hath an ague. Behind him, with his toe ever rasping upon the other's heels, there walked a very stern, black bearded man, with a hard eye and a set mouth. He bore over his shoulder a great knotted stick with 3 jagged nails stuck in the head of it, and from time to time he whirled it up in the air with a quivering arm, as though he could scarce hold back from dashing his companion's brains out.
So in silence they walked under the spread of the branches on the grass grown path from Boldre. "By St. Paul!" quoth the knight, "but this is a passing strange sight, and perchance some very perilous and honorable venture may arise from it. I pray you, Edricson, to ride up to them and to ask them the cause of it." There was no need, however, for him to move, for the twain came swiftly towards them until they were within a spear's length, when the man with the cross sat himself down sullenly upon a tussock of grass by the wayside, while the other stood beside him with his great cudgel still hanging over his head. So intent was he that he raised his eyes neither to knight nor to squires, but kept them ever fixed with a savage glare upon his comrade. "I pray you, friend," said Sir Nigel, "to tell us truthfully who you are and why you follow this man with such bitter enmity." "So long as I am within the pale of the king's law," the stranger answered, "I cannot see why I should render account to every passing wayfarer." "You are no very shrewd reasoner, fellow," quoth the knight; "for if it be within the law for you to threaten him with your club, then it is also lawful for me to threaten you with my sword." The man with the cross was down in an instant on his knees upon the ground, with hands clasped above him and his face shining with hope. "For dear Christ's sake, my fair lord," he cried in a crackling voice, "I have at my belt a bag with 100 rose nobles, and I will give it to you freely if you will but pass your sword through this man's body." "How, you foul knave!" exclaimed Sir Nigel hotly. "Do you think that a cavalier's arm is to be bought like a packman's ware? By St. Paul! I have little doubt that this fellow hath some very good cause to hold you in hatred." "Indeed, my fair sir, you speak sooth," quoth he with the club, while the other seated himself once more by the wayside. "For this man is Peter Peterson, a very noted reeve, draw latch, and murtherer, who has wrought much evil for many years in the parts about Winchester. It was but the other day, upon the feasts of the blessed Simon and Jude, that he slew my younger brother William in Bere Forest, for which, by the blackthorn of Glastonbury, I shall have his heart's blood, though I walk behind him to the further end of the earth." "But if this be indeed so," asked Sir Nigel, "why is it that you have come with him so far through the forest?" "Because I am an honest Englishman, and will take no more than the law allows. For when the deed was done this foul and base wretch fled to the sanctuary at St. Cross, and I, as you may think, after him with all the posse. The prior, however, hath so ordered that while he holds this cross no man may lay hand upon him without the ban of church, which Heaven forfend from me or mine. Yet if for an instant he lay the cross aside, or if he fail to journey to Pitt's Deep, where it is ordered that he shall take ship to outland parts, or if he take not the first ship, or if, until the ship be ready, he walk not every day into the sea as far as his loins, then he becomes outlaw, and I shall forthwith dash out his brains." At this the man on the ground snarled up at him like a rat, while the other clenched his teeth and shook his club, and looked down at him with murder in his eyes. Knight and squire gazed from rogue to avenger, but as it was a matter which none could mend, they tarried no longer, but rode upon their way. Alleyne, looking back, saw that the murderer had drawn bread and cheese from his scrip, and was silently munching it, with a protecting cross still hugged to his breast, while the other, black and grim, stood in the sunlit road and threw his dark shadow athwart him. Chapter 14. Of the White Company. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Clive Catterall. The White Company by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Chapter 15. How the yellow cog sailed forth from Lepe. That night the company slept at St. Leonard's, in the great monastic barns and spicarium, ground well known both to Alleyne and to John, for they were almost within sight of the Abbey of Beaulieu. A strange thrill it gave to the young squire to see the well remembered white dress once more, and to hear the measured tolling of the deep vespers bell. At early dawn they passed across the broad, sluggish, reed girt stream, men, horses, and baggage in the flat ferry barges, and so journeyed on through the fresh morning air past Exbury to Lepe. Topping the heathy down, they came of a sudden full in sight of the old seaport, a cluster of houses, a trail of blue smoke, and a bristle of masts. To the right and left the long blue curve of the Solent lapped in a fringe of foam upon the yellow beach. Some way out from the town a line of pessoners, creyers, and other small craft were rolling lazily on the gentle swell. Further out still lay a great merchant ship, high ended, deep waisted, painted of a canary yellow, and towering above the fishing boats like a swan amongst ducklings. "By St. Paul!" said the knight, "our good merchant of Southampton hath not played us false, for methinks I can see our ship down yonder. He said that she would be of great size and of a yellow shade." "By my hilt, yes," muttered Aylward. "She is yellow as a kite's claw, and would carry as many men as there are pips in a pomegranate." "It is well," remarked Terlake, "for methinks, my fair lord, that we are not the only ones who are waiting a passage to Gascony. Mine eye catches at times a flash and sparkle among yonder houses, which assuredly never came from a shipman's jacket or the gaberdine of a burgher." "I can also see it," said Alleyne, shading his eyes with his hand, "and I can see men at arms in yonder boats which ply betwixt the vessels and the shore. But methinks that we are very welcome here, for already they come forth to meet us." A tumultuous crowd of fishermen, citizens, and women had indeed swarmed out from the northern gate, and approached them up the side of the moor, waving their hands and dancing with joy, as though a great fear had been rolled back from their minds. At their head rode a very large and solemn man, with a long chain and a drooping lip. He wore a fur tippet round his neck and a heavy gold chain over it, with a medallion which dangled in front of him. "Welcome, most puissant and noble lord!" he cried, doffing his bonnet to Black Simon. "I have heard of your lordship's valiant deeds, and in sooth they might be expected from your lordship's face and bearing. Is there any small matter in which I may oblige you?" "Since you ask me," said the man at arms, "I would take it kindly if you could spare a link or two of the chain which hangs round your neck." "What! the corporation chain?" cried the other in horror. "The ancient chain of the township of Lepe? This is but a sorry jest, Sir Nigel." "What the plague did you ask me for, then?" said Simon. "But if it is Sir Nigel Loring with whom you would speak, that is he upon the black horse." The Mayor of Lepe gazed with amazement on the mild face and slender frame of the famous warrior. "Your pardon, my gracious lord," he cried. "You see in me the mayor and chief magistrate of the ancient and powerful town of Lepe. I bid you very heartily welcome, and the more so as you are come at a moment when we are sore put to it for means of defence." "Ha!" cried Sir Nigel, pricking up his ears. "Yes, my lord, for the town being very ancient and the walls as old as the town, it follows that they are very ancient too. But there is a certain villainous and bloodthirsty Norman pirate, hight Tete Noire, who, with a Genoan called Tito Caracci, commonly known as Spadebeard, hath been a mighty scourge upon these coasts. Indeed, my lord, they are very cruel and black hearted men, graceless and ruthless, and if they should come to the ancient and powerful town of Lepe, then good bye to the ancient and powerful town of Lepe," quoth Ford, whose lightness of tongue could at times rise above his awe of Sir Nigel. The knight, however, was too much intent upon the matter in hand to give heed to the flippancy of his squire. "Have you then cause," he asked, "to think that these men are about to venture an attempt upon you?" "They have come in two great galleys," answered the mayor, "with two banks of oars on either side, and great store of engines of war and of men at arms. At Weymouth and at Portland they have murdered and ravished. Yesterday morning they were at Cowes, and we saw the smoke from the burning crofts. To day they lie at their ease at Freshwater, and we fear much lest they come upon us and do us mischief." "We cannot tarry," said Sir Nigel, riding towards the town, with the mayor upon his left side. "The prince awaits us at Bordeaux, and we may not be behind the general muster. Yet I will promise you that on our way we shall find time to pass Freshwater, and to prevail upon these rovers to leave you in peace." "We are much beholden to you," cried the mayor; "but I cannot see, my lord, how without a warship you may venture against these men. With your archers, however, you might well hold the town, and do them great scathe if they attempt to land." "There is a very proper cog out yonder," said Sir Nigel. "It would be a very strange thing if any ship were not a war ship when it had such men as these upon her decks. Certes, we shall do as I say, and that no later than this very day." "My lord," said a rough haired, dark faced man, who walked by the knight's other stirrup, with his head sloped to catch all that he was saying, "by your leave, I have no doubt that you are skilled in land fighting and the marshalling of lances, but, by my soul, you will find it another thing upon the sea. I am the master shipman of this yellow cog, and my name is Goodwin Hawtayne. I have sailed since I was as high as this staff, and I have fought against these Normans and against the Genoese, as well as the Scotch, the Bretons, the Spanish, and the Moors. I tell you, sir, that my ship is over light and over frail for such work, and it will but end with our having our throats cut, or being sold as slaves to the Barbary heathen." "I also have experienced one or two gentle and honorable ventures upon the sea," quoth Sir Nigel, "and I am right blithe to have so fair a task before us. I think, good master shipman, that you and I may win great honor in this matter, and I can see very readily that you are a brave and stout man." "I like it not," said the other sturdily. "In God's name, I like it not. And yet Goodwin Hawtayne is not the man to stand back when his fellows are for pressing forward. By my soul, be it sink or swim, I shall turn her beak into Freshwater Bay, and if our good master Witherton of Southampton like not my handling of his ship, then he may find another master shipman." They were close by the old north gate of the little town, and Alleyne, half turning in his saddle, looked back at the motley crowd who followed. The bowmen and men at arms had broken their ranks, and were intermingled with the fishermen and citizens, whose laughing faces and hearty gestures bespoke the weight of care from which this welcome arrival had relieved them. Here and there among the moving throng of dark jerkins and of white surcoats were scattered dashes of scarlet and blue, the wimples or shawls of the women. Aylward, with a fishing lass on either arm, was vowing constancy alternately to her on the right and her on the left, while big John towered in the rear with a little chubby maiden enthroned upon his shoulder, her soft white arm curled round his shining headpiece. So the throng moved on, until at the very gate it was brought to a stand by a wondrously fat man, who came darting forth from the town with rage in every feature of his rubicund face. "How now, Sir Mayor?" he roared in a voice like a bull. "How now, Sir Mayor? How have the clams and the scallops?" "By Our Lady, my sweet Sir Oliver," cried the mayor, "I have had so much to think of with these wicked villains so close upon us, that it had quite gone out of my head." "Words, words!" shouted the other furiously. "Am I to be put off with words? I say to you again, how have the clams and scallops?" "My fair sir, you flatter me," cried the mayor. "I am a peaceful trader, and I am not wont to be so shouted at upon so small a matter." "Small!" shrieked the other. "Small! Clams and scallops! Ask me to your table to partake of the dainty of the town, and when I come, a barren welcome and a bare board. Where is my spear bearer?" "Nay, nay, Sir Oliver, Sir Oliver!" cried Sir Nigel, laughing. "Let your anger be appeased, since instead of this dish you come upon an old friend and comrade." "By St. Martin of Tours!" shouted the fat knight, his wrath all changed in an instant to joy. "If it is not my dear little game rooster of the Garonne! Ah, my sweet coz, I am right glad to see you. What days we have seen together!" "Aye, by my faith!" cried Sir Nigel, with sparkling eyes. "We have seen some valiant men, and we have shown our pennons in some noble skirmishes. By St. Paul! we have had great joys in France." "And sorrows also," quoth the other. "I have some sad memories of the land. Can you recall that which befell us at Libourne?" "Nay, I cannot call to mind that we ever so much as drew sword at the place." "Man, man!" cried Sir Oliver, "your mind still runs on nought but blades and bassinets. Hast no space in thy frame for the softer joys. Ah, even now I can scarce speak of it unmoved. So noble a pie, such tender pigeons, and sugar in the gravy instead of salt. You were by my side that day, as was Sir Claude Latour and the Lord of Pommers." "I remember it," said Sir Nigel, laughing. "And how you harried the cook down the street, and spoke of setting fire to the inn. By St. Paul! most worthy mayor, my old friend is a perilous man, and I rede you that you compose your differences with him on such terms as you may." "Clams and scallops shall be ready within the hour," the mayor answered. "I had asked Sir Oliver Buttesthorn to do my humble board the honor to partake at it of the dainty upon which we take some little pride. But in sooth this alarm of pirates hath cast such a shadow on my wits that I am like one distraught. But I trust, Sir Nigel, that you will also partake of none meat with me." "I have overmuch to do," Sir Nigel answered, "for we must be aboard, horse and man, as early as we may. How many do you muster, Sir Oliver?" "43. The 40 are drunk, and the 3 are but indifferent sober. I have them all safe upon the ship." "They had best find their wits again, for I shall have work for every man of them ere the sun set. It is my intention, if it seems good to you, to try a venture against these Norman and Genoese rovers." "They carry caviare and certain very noble spices from the Levant aboard of ships from Genoa," quoth Sir Oliver. "We may come to great profit through the business. I pray you, master shipman, that when you go aboard you pour a helmet full of sea water over any of my rogues whom you may see there." Leaving the lusty knight and the Mayor of Lepe, Sir Nigel led the company straight down to the water's edge, where long lines of flat lighters swiftly bore them to the vessel. Horse after horse was slung by main force up from the barges, and after kicking and plunging in empty air was dropped into the deep waist of the yellow cog, where rows of stalls stood ready for their safe keeping. Englishmen in those days were skilled and prompt in such matters, for it was not so long before that Edward had embarked as many as 50,000 men in the port of Orwell, with their horses and their baggage, all in the space of 24 hours. So urgent was Sir Nigel on the shore, and so prompt was Goodwin Hawtayne on the cog, that Sir Oliver Buttesthorn had scarce swallowed his last scallop ere the peal of the trumpet and clang of Nacre announced that all was ready and the anchor drawn. In the last boat which left the shore the two commanders sat together in the sheets, a strange contrast to one another, while under the feet of the rowers was a litter of huge stones which Sir Nigel had ordered to be carried to the cog. These once aboard, the ship set her broad mainsail, purple in color, with a golden St. Christopher bearing Christ upon his shoulder in the centre of it. The breeze blew, the sail bellied, overheeled the portly vessel, and away she plunged through the smooth blue rollers, amid the clang of the minstrels on her poop and the shouting of the black crowd who fringed the yellow beach. To the left lay the green island of Wight, with its long, low, curving hills peeping over each other's shoulders to the sky line. To the right the wooded Hampshire coast as far as eye could reach. Above, a steel blue heaven, with the wintry sun shimmering down upon them, and enough of frost to set the breath a smoking. "By St. Paul!" said Sir Nigel gayly, as he stood upon the poop and looked on either side of him, "it is a land which is very well worth fighting for, and it were a pity to go to France for what may be had at home. Did you not spy a crooked man upon the beach?" "Nay, I spied nothing," grumbled Sir Oliver, "for I was hurried down with a clam stuck in my gizzard and an untasted goblet of Cyprus on the board behind me." "I saw him, my fair lord," said Terlake, "an old man with one shoulder higher than the other." "'Tis a sign of good fortune," quoth Sir Nigel. "Our path was also crossed by a woman and by a priest, so all should be well with us. What say you, Edricson?" "I cannot tell, my fair lord. The Romans of old were a very wise people, yet certes they placed their faith in such matters. So too did the Greeks and divers other ancient peoples who were famed for their learning. Yet of the moderns there are many who scoff at all omens." "There can be no manner of doubt about it," said Sir Oliver Buttesthorn. "I can well remember that in Navarre one day it thundered on the left out of a cloudless sky. We knew that ill would come of it, nor had we long to wait. Only 13 days after, a haunch of prime venison was carried from my very tent door by the wolves, and on the same day 2 flasks of old vernage turned sour and muddy." "You may bring my harness from below," said Sir Nigel to his squires, "and also, I pray you, bring up Sir Oliver's, and we shall don it here. Ye may then see to your own gear, for this day you will, I hope, make a very honorable entrance into the field of chivalry, and prove yourselves to be very worthy and valiant squires. And now, Sir Oliver, as to our dispositions, would it please you that I should order them, or will you?"
"You, my cockerel, you! By Our Lady, I am no chicken, but I cannot claim to know as much of war as the squire of Sir Walter Manny. Settle the matter to your own liking."
"You shall fly your pennon upon the forepart then, and I upon the poop. For foreguard I shall give you your own 40 men with 200 archers. 200 men with my own men at arms and squires will serve as poop guard. 10 archers with 30 shipmen under the master may hold the waist, while 10 lie aloft with stones and arbalests. How like you that?"
"Good, by my faith, good! But here comes my harness, and I must to work, for I cannot slip into it as I was wont when first I set my face to the wars."
Meanwhile there had been bustle and preparation in all parts of the great vessel. The archers stood in groups about the decks, new stringing their bows and testing that they were firm at the nocks. Among them moved Aylward and other of the old soldiers, with a few whispered words of precept here and of warning there.
"Stand to it, my hearts of gold," said the old bowman as he passed from knot to knot. "By my hilt, we are in luck this journey. Bear in mind the old saying of the Company."
"What is that, Aylward?" cried several, leaning on their bows and laughing at him.
"'Tis the master bowyer's rede. Every bow well bent, every shaft well sent, every stave well nocked, every string well locked. There, with that jingle in his head, a bracer on his left hand, a shooting glove on his right, and a farthing's worth of wax in his girdle, what more doth a bowman need?" "It would not be amiss," said Hordle John, "if under his girdle he had 4 farthings worth of wine." "Work first, wine afterwards, mon camarade. But it is time that we took our order, for methinks that between the Needle Rocks and the Alum Cliffs yonder I can catch a glimpse of the topmasts of the galleys. Hewett, Cook, Johnson, Cunningham, your men are of the poop guard. Thornbury, Walters, Hackett, Baddlesmere, you are with Sir Oliver on the forecastle. Simon, you bide with your lord's banner, but 10 men must go forward." Quietly and promptly the men took their places, lying flat upon their faces on the deck, for such was Sir Nigel's order. Near the prow was planted Sir Oliver's spear with his arms, a boar's head gules upon a field of gold. Close by the stern stood Black Simon with the pennon of the house of Loring. In the waist gathered the Southampton mariners, hairy and burly men with their jerkins thrown off, their waists braced tight, swords, mallets, and pole axes in their hands. Their leader, Goodwin Hawtayne, stood upon the poop and talked with Sir Nigel, casting his eye up sometimes at the swelling sail, and then glancing back at the 2 seamen who held the tiller. "Pass the word," said Sir Nigel, "that no man shall stand to arms or draw his bowstring until my trumpeter shall sound. It would be well that we should seem to be a merchant ship from Southampton, and appear to flee from them." "We shall see them anon," said the master shipman. "Ha, said I not so? There they lie, the water snakes, in Freshwater Bay. And mark the reek of smoke from yonder point, where they have been at their devil's work. See how their shallops pull from the land. They have seen us and called their men aboard. Now they draw up the anchor. See them like ants upon the forecastle. They stoop and heave like handy shipmen. But, my fair lord, these are no niefs. I doubt but we have taken in hand more than we can do. Each of these ships is a galleass, and of the largest and swiftest make." "I would I had your eyes," said Sir Nigel, blinking at the pirate galleys. "They seem very gallant ships, but I trust that we shall have much pleasance from our meeting with them. It would be well to pass the word that we should neither give nor take quarter this day. Have you perchance a priest or friar aboard this ship, Master Hawtayne?" "No, my fair lord." "Well, well, it is no great matter for my company, for they were all houseled and shriven ere we left Twynham Castle, and Father Christopher of the Priory gave me his word that they were as fit to march to heaven as to Gascony. But my mind misdoubts me as to these Winchester men who have come with Sir Oliver, for they appear to be a very ungodly crew. Pass the word that the men kneel, and that the under officers repeat to them the Pater, the Ave, and the Credo."
With a clank of arms the rough archers and seamen took to their knees, with bent heads and crossed hands, listening to the hoarse mutter from the file leaders. It was strange to mark the hush, so that the lapping of the water, the straining of the sail, and the creaking of the timbers grew louder of a sudden upon the ear. Many of the bowmen had drawn amulets and relics from their bosoms, while he who possessed some more than usually sanctified treasure passed it down the line of his comrades, that all might kiss and reap the virtue. The yellow cog had now shot out from the narrow waters of the Solent, and was plunging and rolling on the long heave of the open channel. The wind blew freshly from the east, with a very keen edge to it, and the great sail bellied roundly out, laying the vessel over until the water hissed beneath her lee bulwarks. Broad and ungainly she floundered from wave to wave, dipping her round bows deeply into the blue rollers, and sending the white flecks of foam in a spatter over her decks. On her larboard quarter lay the two dark galleys, which had already hoisted sail, and were shooting out from Freshwater Bay in swift pursuit, their double line of oars giving them a vantage which could not fail to bring them up with any vessel which trusted to sails alone. High and bluff the English cog, long, black, and swift the pirate galleys, like two fierce lean wolves which have seen a lordly and unsuspecting stag walk past their forest lair. "Shall we turn, my fair lord, or shall we carry on?" asked the master shipman, looking behind him with anxious eyes. "Nay, we must carry on, and play the part of the helpless merchant." "But your pennons? They will see that we have two knights with us." "Yet it would not be to a knight's honor or good name to lower his pennon. Let them be, and they will think that we are a wine ship from Gascony, or that we bear the wool bales of some mercer of the staple. Ma foi, but they are very swift. They swoop upon us like two goshawks on a heron. Is there not some symbol or device upon their sails?" "That on the right," said Edricson, "appears to have the head of an Ethiop upon it." "'Tis the badge of Tete Noire the Norman," cried a seaman mariner. "I have seen it before when he harried us at Winchelsea. He is a wondrous large and strong man, with no ruth for man, woman, or beast. They say that he hath the strength of six, and certes he hath the crimes of six upon his soul. See now to the poor souls who swing at either end of his yard arm." At each end of the yard there did indeed hang the dark figure of a man, jolting and lurching with hideous jerkings of its limbs at every plunge and swoop of the galley. "By St. Paul," said Sir Nigel, "and by the help of St. George and Our Lady, it will be a very strange thing if our black headed friend does not himself swing thence ere he may be many hours older. But what is that upon the other galley?" "It is the red cross of Genoa. This Spade beard is a very noted captain, and it is his boast that there are no seamen and no archers in the world who can compare to those who serve the Doge Boccanegra." "That we shall prove," said Goodwin Hawtayne; "but it would be well, ere they close with us, to raise up the mantlets and pavises as a screen against their bolts." He shouted a hoarse order, and his seamen worked swiftly and silently, heightening the bulwarks and strengthening them. The three ships' anchors were at Sir Nigel's command carried into the waist and tied to the mast with 20 feet of cable between them, each under the care of 4 seamen. 8 others were stationed with leather water bags to quench any fire arrows which might come aboard, while others were sent up the mast to lie along the yard and drop stones or shoot arrows as the occasion served. "Let them be supplied with all that is heavy and weighty in the ship," said Sir Nigel. "Then we must send them up Sir Oliver Buttesthorn," quoth Ford. The knight looked at him with a face which struck the smile from his lips. "No squire of mine," he said, "shall ever make jest of a belted knight. And yet," he added, with his eyes softening, "I know that it is but a boy's mirth, with no sting in it. Yet I should ill do my part towards your father if I did not teach you to curb your tongue play." "They will lay us aboard on either quarter, my lord," cried the master. "See how they stretch out from each other. The Norman hath a mangonel or a trabuch upon the forecastle. See, they bend to the levers. They are about to loose it." "Aylward," cried the knight, "pick your 3 trustiest archers, and see if you cannot do something to hinder their aim. Methinks they are within long arrow flight." "17 score paces. said the archer, running his eye backwards and forwards.
"By my 10 finger bones, it would be a strange thing if we could not notch a mark at that distance. Here, Watkin of Sowley, Arnold, Long Williams, let us show the rogues they have English bowmen to deal with."
The three archers named stood at the further end of the poop, balancing themselves with feet widely spread and bows drawn, until the heads of the cloth yard arrows were level with the centre of the stave.
"You are the surer, Watkin," said Aylward, standing by them with shaft upon string. "Do you take the rogue with the red coif. You two bring down the man with the headpiece, and I will hold myself ready if you miss. Ma foi, they are about to loose her. Shoot, mes garcons, or you will be too late."
The throng of pirates had cleared away from the great wooden catapult, leaving two of their number to discharge it. One in a scarlet cap bent over it, steadying the jagged rock which was balanced upon the spoon shaped end of the long wooden lever. The other held the loop of the rope which would release the catch and send the unwieldy missile hurtling through the air. So for an instant they stood, showing hard and clear against the white sail behind them. The next, Red Cap had fallen across the stone with an arrow between his ribs, and the other, struck in the leg and the throat, was writhing and spluttering upon the ground. As he toppled backwards he had loosed the spring, and the huge beam of wood, swinging round with tremendous force, cast the corpse of his comrade so close to the English ship that its mangled and distorted limbs grazed their very stern. As to the stone, it glanced off obliquely and fell midway between the vessels. A roar of cheering and of laughter broke from the rough archers and seamen at the sight, answered by a yell of rage from their pursuers.
"Lie low, mes enfants," cried Aylward, motioning with his left hand. "They will learn wisdom. They are bringing forward shield and mantlet. We shall have some pebbles about our ears ere long."
Chapter 15.